From a studio high above the clouds of the Okanagan Valley, this is the Cannabis Potcast. Exploring the world of Canadian cannabis culture, one toke at a time. Now, here's your host and bud tender, Gary Johnston.
And with those dulcet tones from my son Ian, let me welcome you back to the Cannabis Podcast. I'm so excited to have you back, or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you've never been here before, this is your very first visit and you're confused. Well, let me correct that. If that's the case, let me welcome you for your very first time. What you may not know is that for the next 30 or 40 minutes or so, we are going to fill your head with information about a plant I am absolutely passionate about, and that is cannabis. So welcome along for the ride. And before we get too much further, let me remind you this program is intended only for those 19 or older in your jurisdiction, and is intended purely for entertainment and perhaps educational purposes. You should always consume your cannabis responsibly. In episode 162, we're going to be saying goodbye to some very special people outside of the cannabis world. And in the cannabis world, we got all kinds of information for you. A patio is opening. We're going to understand a couple of terpenes better, limonene and bisabolol. Maybe you don't know what the live in live resin or live rosin means. Well, we're going to explain that for you. Health Canada has recently proposed an increase to the canopy space for micro-growers. Mixed reaction to that. We'll have a story on that. We're also going to tell you how cannabis can help with low mood. We don't usually cover a lot of stories focused on the United States, but since the NCAA has an impact on a lot of Canadian players who play in all the U.S. colleges, it's interesting to note the news that they have as well. And we're of course going to stop on Cultivar Corner and have a sample of some weed, and we are stopping in the Rocky Mountains. In fact, it's Rocky Mountain Cannabis and their indica, Mercy. Will it show me mercy? Well, you'll find out. All of that and more on episode 162 of the Cannabis Podcast. As always, I want to thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate the fact that you are a listener to the Cannabis Podcast. And I also want to thank my supporters. At buymeacoffee.com/Cannabis Podcast, thanks to Jordana and Jordan. If you feel so inclined and you like what you hear, you can go there too and buy me a doobie. And 1% of the income that comes through that chain goes to climate change research. And I cannot forget to thank my patrons at Patreon. Thanks, Tony, Rob, Gage, Lloyd, and Mitchell. I truly appreciate your support each and every time. And I'll also remind you, if you ever have a comment on anything that happens here on the Cannabis Podcast, please send a note to info@cannabispodcast.com. And now, before we get too much further, I have to share some, well, it's not sad news. It's actually exciting news, but it's sad in the fact that our world is going to change. As you know, there's times when this podcast includes stuff that's happening in my real-world life because it's relevant. You certainly know my son Ian, if you have listened to this podcast at all. He does the intro and all of the stingers for my show, and he does the Cultivar Corner jingle. He's been a big part of the show since I first started it. His wife, Christine, my daughter-in-law, also a big part of the show. You've seen the Cannabis Podcast logo. Guess who did that? And all the associated artwork associated to that. And my grandson, Emile, their son, he just turned 1. In fact, today, the day that I am recording this piece, he turned 1 year old. And tomorrow, we are having a birthday party for my grandson, Emile, and a goodbye party for my son, Ian, and his wife, Christine. She is Latvian, and they are moving to Latvia for a year to be with Christine's family, who have not had the chance to meet our delightful grandson. I'm so excited they're going to have that opportunity. It's going to be sad. We're going to try and keep in touch, obviously, with pictures and videos and everything else, but we can't wait until they come back. They are destined to come back to Canada in a year from now, and based on the fact that this happened once before when my daughter went to Australia for a year, and still hasn't come back, we're hoping that that is going to be the case. So I wish Ian, Christine, and Emile all the best, and I hope you'll join me in doing that and giving them the best, warmest welcome to Riga, Latvia, and I hope they have a fabulous life for the next year until they return to Canada.
From the cannabis-infused studio in the clouds, this is the Cannabis Podcast.
And a story from Stratcan.com, this written by David Brown. A cannabis store in BC is taking a second swing at hosting a cannabis-friendly patio space, this time in Mission. Cheeky's Cannabis, which has 2 locations in BC, one in Maple Ridge and one in Kitsilano, first briefly launched a similar cannabis-friendly patio in Maple Ridge earlier this year. Then in May, Cheeky's partnered with the Mission Springs Brewing Company to host an outdoor cannabis-friendly patio to join the large family-friendly restaurant and brew pub just off Highway 7 in Western Mission. Both businesses are owned, at least in part, by parent company Springs Group, which also helped to bring the two businesses together to create the cannabis consumption space as part of the restaurant. Customers of the Mission Springs Brewery Company can sit inside or enjoy several outdoor patio spaces. One is smoking-friendly and now also allows cannabis smoking and vaping. Overlooking the Fraser River, customers can order food and drinks and enjoy them while sharing a joint with friends. Earlier this year, BC began allowing businesses like cafes, restaurants, bars, and casinos that have approved smoking area to allow cannabis smoking in those same areas. However, municipal bylaws can still be a barrier. A handful of spaces have opened, although many municipalities in the province do not allow these types of smoking areas, regardless of what is being smoked. Laura Rouse, the co-owner of Cheeky's Cannabis, says a previous partnership with a restaurant and pub in Maple Ridge called Billy Miner faced too many challenges from city inspectors, prompting her to launch this new space in Mission. The reception at the new space has been positive. Billy Miner was a trial, but we really struggled to keep the location in Maple Ridge open, says Rouse. Once we gave up on Maple Ridge, then we looked to Mission, and the Mission bylaws allow for smoking on patios. We wanted to take a soft approach and not disrupt anybody. The feedback has been good so far. The space has about 10 tables accessible from the restaurant, with notices on the door that it is a smoking patio. Customers can also choose a nearby non-smoking patio. Rose says Cheeky supplies matches and ashtrays with the store's branding and signs within the space that note it's in partnership with the cannabis store. And it's nice to see more of these spaces opening, and I hope we're going to see more in the future. It's always interesting in this industry how the industry is requesting and hoping for certain things to happen that don't, and then other things that they're not necessarily hoping happen do. Here's a case in point. This is a story from Stratcan.com, and this is written by David Brown. Health Canada recently proposed numerous changes to the federal cannabis regulations, including increasing capacity for micro-cannabis cultivators and processors, as well as cannabis nurseries. The industry's response to these proposed changes has generally been positive. Many of the proposals will streamline specific aspects of the regulations, arguably saving industry and the regulator time and money. The proposal also contains some changes that are likely to benefit consumers, such as allowing more than 1 gram in a pre-roll or allowing view windows on some dried cannabis packaging. The increase in the amount of space someone can grow cannabis under a micro-cultivation limit is something many micro-cultivation license holders tell Stratcan is not a priority, or even something they can afford or take advantage of. This distills down to several key reasons, says Jeff Aubin of Smoker Farms, a micro-cultivator in BC's interior, and as a sidebar, who has been a guest on the Cannabis Podcast a couple of times. The significant issues are the federal and provincial taxes and regulatory fees. But another issue is the challenges small growers like him face in balancing all the stops in the supply chain before their product reaches consumers, and the small portion of that total consumer price that they get to keep. It's completely tone deaf from the government to even think this is the problem that everybody is facing in the cannabis industry, says Aubin. He says other micro-growers he talks with echo the same sentiment. Nobody says, "Oh, I don't have enough space to grow more weed." No, it's always the same. I'm being overtaxed and overregulated to death, and it's completely unsustainable. Aubin says even if he could afford to build more, he likely won't, noting that it is currently only using about 3/4 of his allowed 200 square meters, something many other micros tell Stratcan as well. Not all micros are entirely opposed to the change, though. Kevin McBride, the general manager and QAP at Kootenay's Finest Craft Cannabis, another micro-cultivator in BC's interior, says he would consider expanding his footprint if he could afford it. However, he also says he would likely build a second micro-facility rather than expand his existing footprint. It seems like a double-edged sword, says McBride. We'd love to increase the size of our footprint, but just the construction of a new building and the price of construction these days is so daunting compared with price compression of cannabis. Raising capital to expand 4 times is pretty extreme for a micro-cultivator like ourselves. In addition, expanding that much would mean hiring more people to manage the extra grow space or risk quality dropping, he continues. We've got about as much as we can handle here. For us to quadruple our staff, genetics, quadruple everything, I don't think we could do it even if we wanted to, not to mention the raising of the capital to do that. If you think about micro-craft growers trying to be as hands-on as possible, bigger isn't always better. The bigger you are, the more automated you are, the less hands-on you are. The quality seems to go down. I don't think bigger is always better with growing. Instead, McBride thinks the offering may be more about benefiting smaller and mid-sized standard cultivators, who would gain from some lower fees by being classified as a micro. To me, this seems more of an offering to medium to smaller standard LPs to lighten their load, as opposed to helping micros. If they wanted to really help us, where's the help on the excise tax? Aubin at Smoker Farms agrees with the concerns about excise tax, but adds that there are many other issues preventing growers like him from profiting too. Excise is the number one thing on the tip of everyone's tongue, Aubin continues, but it's not just that. It's provincial taxes and fees as well. So it's not just the excise tax, it's the provinces that are really greedy on it too. The provinces are affecting us just as much as anything else. All these provinces have such different rules. There's no standard when it comes to trying to get your product in a province, and there's no standard how much it's going to cost or when you get paid. Josh Beckett, the owner of Magi Cannabis in Salt Spring Island in BC, takes a similar view to McBride in that he sees the proposal as something more likely to benefit standard cultivators who are already operating within or close to the proposed 800 square meter canopy, rather than helping micros like himself get bigger. This is because micro-cultivators pay a lower rate in terms of federal regulatory fees. Since the cost of adding 4 times as much cultivation space would be so high, especially with the added cost of construction and nearly everything else since COVID-19, he says he doesn't think most micros will be expanding, but he does see some producers downsizing to a new, larger micro license. What is the benefit of having a micro that's 4 times bigger, asked Beckett. What does it matter? Why not just go for a standard license? Or would it be better to go for a second micro? If you were going to quadruple space, wouldn't it be better to go for another micro license so you could take advantage of another $1 million of 1% instead of 2.3% gross licensing fee? I'm trying to wrap my head around what the big advantage is here. What is the carrot they're throwing at us with this? The most significant current limit for his operation, explains Beckett, is that his location doesn't allow him to draw more power that would enable him to expand even if he could afford to. Instead, he recently partnered with someone to build a second micro facility elsewhere on the island, an approach he says, like other growers, will be easier to manage as separate sites rather than one large grow. That's not to say all micro cultivators won't look to expand, adds Beckett, but he doesn't see a trend of any current micros wanting to expand or even being able to afford to. These factors, of course, are different for outdoor micro cultivators, who don't have the same added infrastructure costs, as long as they have the land available to expand. Collier Quinton, co-founder and cultivation director at Weathered Islands Craft Cannabis, a micro and nursery license holder on BC's Texada Island, says if the rules come into force, they will consider expanding, but notes they will need to put in more security fencing and extensive work to prepare the land, including excavation and installation of beds and drip lines. Similar to other micros, with the current state of the market, he says it can be difficult to justify those expenses or find outside investors. We won't take a serious look at it, Quinton tells Strachan. It makes a lot of sense, but this is also a challenging market, and investing more money at this point in time needs to be seriously considered. So there you go, some differing opinions on the increased allowable growth capacity for micros. It'll be interesting to see what the future holds. And because they seem to do such a great write-up on terpenes, we're going back to Mr. Stinky's Green Garden, and this time we're going to talk about another terpene that we're seeing a lot these days, and that is bisabolol. Bisabolol, also called a-bisabolol and levomenol, is a terpene that is known for delivering a fresh floral aroma, but sometimes includes a sweet hint of citrus or spice. Discovered and first isolated in 1951, it's commonly used as a fragrance ingredient in cosmetic and dermatological products, including aftershave cream, deodorants, lipstick, and sports creams. This terpene is found in many plant species other than cannabis, including chamomile, which has been shown to contain up to 50% bisabolol, sage, and South American candela tree. Bisabolol has been revealed by many research studies to deliver significant medicinal benefits, including skin repair, healing, and anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties. Studies have shown that bisabolol conveys additional health benefits, including analgesic, pain management, antibiotic, anti-cancer, and antioxidant properties. In addition, bisabolol has demonstrated the unique ability to increase the absorption of other medicinal molecules by the dermal layers of the skin. This makes this terpene a potentially valuable companion ingredient in topical formulations. A variety of research has revealed the medicinal benefits of the terpene bisabolol. Researchers investigated the effects of bisabolol specifically on skin issues in rodents. Skin inflammation in mice was significantly inhibited by A-bisabolol, reported the study, concluding that its findings suggest that A-bisabolol may be a useful therapeutic candidate for the treatment of skin inflammation. Another study reported that the terpene provides positive efficacy in the treatment of various types of cancer. A-bisabolol could effectively induce cytotoxicity in several human cancer cell lines, reported the study. A 2009 study entitled A Review of the Application and Pharmacological Properties of A-bisabolol and A-bisabolol-rich oils, published in the Journal of the American Oil Chemists, investigated the overall efficacy of this terpene. Researchers noted that low toxicity and anti-inflammatory characteristics of bisabolol. The study defined several of the terpene's more beneficial characteristics, including its ability to treat pain, act as an antibiotic, and its potential role in the treatment of cancer. The use of A-bisabolol or bisabolol-rich oil as an anti-inflammatory agent is ubiquitous. This compound also exhibits several other pharmacological properties, such as analgesic, antibiotic, and anti-cancer activities, concluded the study's researchers. While some cultivars of cannabis are a good source of this terpene, other plants in nature, including chamomile and sage, also produce bisabolol. This terpene has shown promise for patients seeking relief from conditions such as inflammation, pain, and skin irritation. As cannabis product formulations continue to improve, bisabolol may also play a beneficial role in various therapeutic regimens, especially as it pertains to topicals. There you go, another interesting story on another interesting terpene. Everybody needs a little bit more bisabolol in their life. We have probably touched this story a couple of times over the course of the Cannabis Podcast, but you know what? Because terpenes are such an integral part of our cannabis world, I'm not even worried about whether this has appeared before, because it's appropriate to bring it up again. We're heading back to Mr. Stinky's garden, and this is about limonene, the cancer-killing terpene. As its name suggests, limonene is the terpene found in some varieties of cannabis that conveys an aroma of citrus. Strains high in limonene include OG Kush, a hybrid, the Venerable Sour Diesel, a sativa, and Jack the Ripper, a hybrid. Any strain of pot named after orange, lemon, lime, or tangerine likely contains this terpene. For patients, limonene means much more than just a pleasant aroma. This special molecule within cannabis flowers has been found to have amazing medical efficacy. It is capable of everything from relieving depression to battling cancer. In addition to a citrus aroma, the terpene limonene may also convey hints of peppermint and rosemary. Lemons, limes, and tangerines contain limonene. In fact, they contain the exact same molecule that is found in the resin of cannabis flowers. While any of the 200 different terpenes may appear in an individual strain of cannabis, 20,000 different terpenes exist in nature, the most common of which is pinene. As a medicine, limonene helps many different diseases and conditions. Like pinene, it is a powerful anti-inflammatory. This makes it effective for patients with diseases like arthritis, bursitis, and fibromyalgia. Possibly more impressive, however, is the fact that limonene is an anti-proliferative, meaning that it kills cancer cells. Other anti-cancer terpenes include myrcene and linalool. Limonene has also been shown to fight anxiety in patients and even treats acid reflux or heartburn. Other impressive efficacies? It relieves depression and dissolves gallstones. That's right, pot can help you dissolve gallstones if it contains limonene. Unlike cannabinoids that appear only in cannabis, terpenes such as limonene and pinene are found throughout nature and in thousands of different plant species. This means that terpenes can be easily and legally used in testing and research studies. And an interesting article from Mr. Stinky's Green Garden on the benefits of limonene. And now you'll probably be looking for some cannabis that has some limonene in it.
THC, CBD, terpene profiles, what's in me? Oh, please explain to me. Cultivar Corner, Cultivar Corner, oh yeah. Cultivar Corner, please explain this stuff to me.
And once more, here we are with Cultivar Corner, and we are going to a place we have not gone before. We're going to the Rocky Mountains. Yes, we are. Rocky Mountain Cannabis. RockyMountainCannabis.ca is the website. And that's where you're going to find out about the folks at Rocky Mountain Cannabis. Tyler and his son Isaac, Tyler Tetro, the master grower for Rocky Mountain Cannabis, and his son Isaac, had a chance to meet both of them at the recent Growing Opportunities Conference in Kelowna, held by StratCan. And in so doing, I got my hands on some of Rocky Mountain Cannabis Mercy. Now, it's called Mercy for a reason. It's high in myrcene in the terpene profile, about 2% myrcene, in fact. Oh, and when you stick your nose in the jar, and I put my weed into a glass jar after I open it up, and definitely some earthy tones on this. So let me give you a description of what we've got here for Rocky Mountain Cannabis. With an extremely high myrcene terp profile, this strain shows no mercy. An indica-dominant hybrid featuring bright amber hairs exploding through a thick green canopy with medium-sized wool-like buds. Expect a nice tranquil high that's perfect for relaxing after a big day of work or exploring in the Rocky Mountains. Beware of the deceptively low THC this strain packs, because this strain packs a punch and it'll sit you down. Hence the name. The myrcene really dominates the terp profile. Your taste buds will tingle from the intensely delicious flavors of rich berry, sweet pine, and hints of pumpkin spice. Hand-trimmed in golden BC, hang-dried, and cold-cured for 30 days. And your terpene profile is beta-myrcene, trans-beta-ocimene, alpha-pinene, delta-limonene, and beta-caryophyllene. And so those rich berry notes, bit of that, definitely some pine and earthiness from the myrcene. I'm not picking up any hints of the pumpkin spice, but again, that could be just my palate. So I've got some ready to rock in the Air Max, the Arizer Air Max. Let's get that up to temperature. And while we're waiting for that, I have got a joint ready. And really, actually, let's take a look at the buds first. Let's pull out, I got a really nice big bud here. And really some lovely color arrangements on this guy. So at the heart of it, we have a dark green bud with lots of red hairs all over the place. And a nice firm bud, so the cold curing did well. It's really firmly packed. It's been nicely hand-trimmed as well. And what have I got in terms of some trichome fields? Yeah, there they are. It's amazing how cannabis packs all of that deliciousness into those trichomes, isn't it? Just a wonderful little thing. So they are having some fun up at Rocky Mountain Cannabis. They're really enjoying growing up in Golden, BC. Tyler and Isaac doing some fine work with their weed. And this one is really nice. It's time we have a taste. So let me get the joint lit. The Arizer Air Max is just about up to speed. And now here we go. This is Rocky Mountain Cannabis Mercy. And the lineage is Purple Urkel and Appalachia. And I'm not going to tell you the THC until we're a little bit further into it. Terpenes around 3.4%, myrcene at 2%. Nice smooth introduction. And always a danger for me to be doing what will likely be a heavy indica as my first toke of the morning. But that's never stopped me before. Oh yeah, really nice and smooth. I like that, getting a bit of that, the underlying earthiness. I'm not picking up any berry or pine off of the joint, but my Air Max is ready. Let's give that a try. Okay, there's some of those berry notes. Touch of the sweet pine. I'm not getting any pumpkin spice. Oh, but really, really nice in the taste. Yeah, bits of that berry and pine coming through when I pull out the Air Max. Oh, really like the taste of that in the Air Max. Like the smell of the weed in my jar. Like the taste of the weed in the joint. Yes. So flavors, sweet, fruit, and spicy. Terpenes again, myrcene, ocimene, pinene, limonene, and caryophyllene. And I'm starting to get a buzz in my endocannabinoid system, which I always love. Let's get back to the Air Max. And heavy on the myrcene, I'm expecting this to delve into a really nice little body stone as it develops. And here comes that endocannabinoid excitation. My CB1 receptors becoming very active right now. And all of that THC just kind of pushing its way towards those receptors. Got a little happy eyes coming in. Definitely getting more of that cannabinoid exposure. Definitely feeling some high here. Oh, and it's going into a nice little body stone, which is really what I was hoping for. As soon as they told me about this strain, Mercy, because heavy on the myrcene, thought, well, that's probably a really good nighttime smoke. I tend to do my indicas in the nighttime, as opposed to today when I am bursting in the morning with my indica, and I may be down for a nap midway through the day. Yeah, really liking this. It's not coming on really, really strong, but it's definitely coming on so I can feel the high. I've got those happy eyes going, got a nice little body stone going on. I got some lovely euphoria. As they describe it, expect a nice tranquil high, perfect for relaxing after a big day of work. Perfect for relaxing in the morning when you're getting ready. Yeah. Okay, now here's where I let you know. THC on this guy, 21.25%. And we've had this discussion, and this was part of a discussion we had at the event we were all at on Monday. All of these THC values are just kind of a little deceptive in that everybody's talking about these high THCs, and yet you can smoke some weed where the THC here is at 21, just a little over 21%. And I'm getting a really nice buzz. We don't need to have those really high THCs all the time. Our endocannabinoid receptors need a little bit of wake up and some variety and some difference in those THC levels. Tyler was concerned that this particular strain, the Mercy at 21% THC, is not a big seller because of those low THC values. But people need to wake up and discover that some of those weeds in those lower THCs are just delightful. I got such fine happy eyes right now. I got such lovely euphoria going on, and it is moving into a really nice body stone. I am at the mercy of Mercy. Purple Urkel and Appalachia, THC just a little over 21%, terpenes at 3.43%, lots of flavor, lots of aroma coming out of that. This is going to be a nice day, thanks to Rocky Mountain Cannabis from Golden, BC, and Mercy. And as I am often wont to do, after the cannabinoids have been rolling around in my endocannabinoid system for a while, bouncing off my CB1 receptors and hitting the occasional CB2 receptor. Yeah, this is really nice. I'm really enjoying this buzz. It's not a killer, hasn't knocked me on my ass, but it has made me feel really good, really a nice high, lots of euphoria, nice body feeling, nice body stone. I am definitely at the mercy of Mercy.
Sharing stories about good weed while trying good weed. This is the Cannabis Podcast.
You're hearing about it in so many products and so many different areas of cannabis these days. I thought this was an appropriate time for an article from Leafly.com on what is live resin. Of the many different types of cannabis concentrates or extractions, live resin is relatively new to the cannabis world. It's become popular among consumers and producers alike. It preserves the flavors and aromas of the living plant better than other cannabis extractions and is cheaper and easier to make. Live resins usually have a more complex terpene profile and can deliver a more complex experience. What is live resin? Cannabis concentrates are often named or described by their textures or consistencies. Some are hard and brittle like shatter, some waxy, some thick and gooey like batter, and some like sauce. By definition, live resin is a more malleable concentrate. sitting somewhere between a wax and a sauce. Not quite like taffy, yet not too wet. It's typically dark yellow in color, but can vary from light yellow to white. Like all cannabis concentrates, it is extremely sticky, so you'll need a dab tool to handle it. Live resins tend to be potent with a lot of THC, and consumers love it because of its intense flavors and aromas which carry over from the original plant. Live resin distinguishes itself from other types of cannabis concentrates because it is created with fresh, frozen cannabis, plants that are frozen immediately after being cut down at harvest. These plants are kept frozen throughout the extraction process and skip the drying, curing, and trimming phases of harvesting. The drying and curing processes that cannabis plants usually go through can have a devastating impact on terpenes, the plant's flavor and aroma compounds. Terpenes are present in trichomes, which cover buds and surrounding foliage. During drying and curing, moisture and chlorophyll leave the plant. This can expose trichomes to heat, oxygen, and light, all of which can degrade terpenes. Trichomes also tend to break off a plant as it's handled and moved around during harvesting. By freezing the plant immediately after harvest, trichomes are preserved in live resin, and the cannabis plant retained its valuable terpene profile, original flavor, and fragrance throughout the extraction process and into the final product. After harvesting, frozen plants are put through a solvent extraction process using butane, propane, or another solvent. After harvest, here are the steps for creating live resin. Freeze the plants or plant matter, extract the oil, and process into live resin. Plants are kept at or below freezing temperatures through the extraction process. After extraction, live resin is often heated in a vacuum oven. It can be packaged as is or added to carts or vape pens. The difference between cured resin and live resin is mainly in starting material. Cured resin is made from dried plant material, whereas live resin is made from frozen plant material that is kept frozen through the extraction process. Cured resin is also more of a general term for an extraction from dried cannabis that will be turned into shatter, wax, batter, or various other types of concentrates. Live resin versus live rosin. Live resin is created by putting frozen cannabis plants through a solvent extraction, which uses a chemical such as butane or propane. Live rosin is solventless. It uses heat and pressure to remove trichomes from the plant, usually through a press. Both extracts are live because they both use frozen cannabis plants as source material. Simple resins and rosins exist which use dried plants, not frozen ones, and which also use solvent and solventless extraction processes, respectively. Distillate is a cannabis oil that is created when a resin is refined, either to remove impurities or to isolate a specific compound. It does not use frozen cannabis plants as its source material as live resin does. When distillate is processed, it usually lacks terpenes and therefore smell, taste, and flavor. Some consumers may prefer this neutral flavor in a vape cart, but it is quite different than the flavorful, terpy live resin. And now you have a better understanding of what is live resin. You're hearing it and seeing it all over the place. The next time you walk into a cannabis store, you can now confidently express a desire for some live resin, understanding exactly what you're asking for.
From the cannabis-infused studio in the clouds, this is the Cannabis Podcast.
And some more positive words from the folks at Mr. Stinky's Dog Garden. Here's from Mr. Stinky's Green Garden, how cannabis can help with a low mood. Depression is a common but serious mood disorder that can have a significant impact on the quality of your life and your relationships. Whether you've been formally diagnosed or have explored treatment options on your own, you probably already know that science has not made many advancements in the diagnosis and treatment of depression. You may also have been frustrated by the fact that the only options your doctor offered were prescription drugs or talk therapy, or bombarded with a deluge of messages from Big Pharma telling us that taking prescription antidepressants is the only way to handle feeling low. Pharmaceutical antidepressants were introduced in the 1950s, and now there are more than 30 on the market. These are a viable option for some, but are certainly not for everyone. Many prescription antidepressants target serotonin levels, and cannabis works in much the same way by increasing levels of serotonin. This was demonstrated in a 2007 study with animals. A 2009 study showed that an antidepressant effect can be stimulated in rats, merely activating cannabinoid receptors, the same mechanism used by cannabis. Another study conducted in 2015 showed that cannabis could help with chronic stress by keeping the endocannabinoid system working correctly. There is now a significant amount of evidence suggesting problems with the endocannabinoid system cause low mood. Unfortunately, researchers don't yet know the exact way in which endocannabinoids influence emotions and behaviors, but they do know that when there is a deficiency of endocannabinoids in the body, or when they do not function properly, depressive symptoms can result. It is believed that cannabis can act in much the same way as the body's natural cannabinoids, yes, you have them, and stimulate the endocannabinoid receptors, which can lessen the symptoms of depression. Unsurprisingly, Big Pharma is working on developing several types of drugs that alter the endocannabinoid system, and some are already on the market. But is it necessary to turn to prescription drugs for this effect, or could you use something more natural like cannabis itself? Now there's a good question, and I think you know the answer. And for this story, to a source that I don't think we've ever used before, marijuanamoment.net. The NCAA, now, and again, typically this podcast is focused on the Canadian cannabis culture, but as you know, every once in a while there's a story that pops up from the United States that just makes sense because they kind of have an impact. And this is one of those moments. The NCAA has voted to remove marijuana from banned substance list for college athletes. About 5 months after the NCAA's Decision 1 Council proposed the rule change, the body adopted the policy on Tuesday, emphasizing that cannabis is not a performance-enhancing drug and that it should be treated the same way as alcohol. The reform builds on a 2022 change that increased the allowable THC threshold for college athletes, aligning the NCAA's rules with those of the World Anti-Doping Agency. The newly adopted rule, which amends the NCAA's drug testing policies for student sports championships and postseason participation in football, will also be retroactively applied, discontinuing any penalties players are currently facing for a cannabis-related violation. The NCAA drug testing program is intended to focus on integrity of competition, and cannabis products do not provide a competitive advantage, Josh Whitman, chair of the council, said in a press release. The council's focus is on policy centered on student-athlete health and well-being rather than punishment for cannabis use. Cannabinoids will be addressed like other non-performance-enhancing drugs like alcohol, the NCAA said in a social media post. NCAA members will focus on harm reduction strategies, problematic cannabis use, centering health of student-athletes. This reform follows a preliminary recommendation last June from the NCAA's Committee on Competitive Safeguards and Medical Aspects of Sports that each of the organization's 3 governing bodies remove marijuana from the banned substance list. Divisions 2 and 3 are yet to vote on the proposal. Historically, college athletes have been subject to testing during postseason play. Positive tests could mean an entire season of lost eligibility. Officials have said the changes are intended to focus more on problematic use than penalizing players for a single mistake. Interesting perspective from the NCAA, lessening their rules, not paying as much attention to their rules, not caring about cannabis as a banned substance because they have now determined that it is not a performance-enhancing drug. And there's no problem with your athletes just being a little chill. Thank you so much for being here. Truly appreciate the fact that you are a listener of the Cannabis Podcast and that you are along for the ride. Well, we are coming to the conclusion of another episode, and that means it's time to make you have a little chuckle. Before we finish, maybe you'll have a chuckle as you finish your next toke. And where are we going today? We are going to humornama.com and their weed joke section. Why shouldn't you smoke weed during a thunderstorm? Because lightning strikes the highest object. Why does the little cannabis plant spend every other week at his father's house? Because his parents have joint custody. What can you do if you can't afford a nice television? Just smoke a ton of weed and read the dictionary. It's called high definition. Your eyes look red, said the cop. Have you been smoking weed?
Your eyes look glazed, I replied. Have you been eating donuts?
And on that, Groner, we will call it a conclusion. Once more, if you ever have a comment on anything you hear, please send a note to info@cannabispodcast.com. I truly appreciate hearing from you. Thanks so much for being here. That's it for episode 162 of the Cannabis Podcast.
From the cannabis-infused studio, high above the Okanagan Valley, this was the Cannabis Podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's show. To check out more great cannabis podcasts, go to podconnects.com. Here's a preview of one of our other shows.
I'm Joyce Gerber, the creator and host of the award-winning podcast, The Canna Mom Show. And we are on a mission to enhance the impact women have on this industry as business professionals, healthcare providers, policy advocates, caregivers, moms, by sharing and preserving their stories of love and kindness, wisdom, and hope. I am so grateful to have found my tribe of Canna podcasters right here on PodConX, and look forward to our work of crushing the stigma around cannabis and caregivers and building this new industry together.